nobody can say that I didn't do enough research for this piece of gear, because I have a little bit more for you, and it is all culminating into one final research project, one final test. But here is the second to last of it. Now, earlier I did a strength test with this blade against a male aubergine. So I took it and I whacked both sides pretty sufficiently against the male to see if any damage was done to the blade. I could not see a single bit of damage, no marking, no imprints, hardly any scratches, so I decided I wanted to up the ante. Last Saturday, while it thunderstormed on us and it rained basically the entire time we were outside, my friend brought his HMB helmet to the field because he wanted to make sure it fit him, and I also asked him to because I wanted to get a bit of an endurance test against it. I wanted to hit this thing against it, simulate it hitting plate armor, other hard surfaces like possibly hard shields, and see just how it fared. Alright, let's see how it fared.
Take some wax.
Alright. And I have to say, it fared pretty damn well. I whacked this thing continuously, repeatedly, and pretty hard against his helmet, and it held up. No! I knew that was gonna happen! He gave up halfway. Gotta say, I'm impressed. It didn't get scuffed, it didn't get scratched. Now, we went even further and decided to start hitting it on the scales of his Aventail, because we wanted to see, would those scales dent, would they rip, would they tear, would they break this blade? And I basically saw only some superficial markings on it. So there you can see kind of the scuffing that happened to it. Seems to be mostly paint or like scuff marks, but the blade itself that we whacked is still smooth and still pretty damn strong. And so it seemed like most of the damage was pretty superficial. It was external. It was a little bit of scuffing, a little bit of scratching, but despite my better efforts to wrench it and twist it, to pull at it right here where maybe the blade got some damage from the scales even though it didn't, and letting it sit in the rain, this held up. The handle is still on pretty tight, so I can twist it and it's still on there. The guard, still solid. There's no wiggle in it. And the blade does not have any breaks in it. It doesn't have any dents. The core is still just as rigid. I can't hear any stress fractures or stress breaks in it. No crinkling, no bristles, nothing. This sword is very, very tough from what I'm seeing so far. I was not doing light taps with this. I was hitting pretty hard against his helmet. But I was not done. And I didn't want anyone to come at me for the fact that I tested it kind of versus a two-handed Kalamazoo Radzig sword. So I went and picked up the Ragnar, like whatever, Viking sword from Kalamazoo. This is like a very typical, it's part of like I think one of the novice lines. It's got a thick blade, you know, it's just a standard Kalamazoo sword. And I wanted to put them to the test. So I whacked myself with both of them, and they felt exactly the same. Even though this one has such a tapered blade compared to the other one, they felt the exact same. I literally couldn't tell the difference. The only way I would be able to tell what I was hitting myself with was the weight. Now the weight on the FakeSteel is significantly more than the Calamasil. It's about, I want to say, like a third, maybe even twice as heavy. So there is definitely heft behind this one. Is that a bad thing? Depends. If you want to be able to swing very quickly, pop shots, then the Calamasil might actually be a better choice if you're trying to get in quick. But if you want to control the fight, if you want to brute force, if you want to feel like you're swinging something with some good weight to it, and if you want the weight in the back, whereas with the Calamasil, all the weight, despite the fact that it is lighter, is up here. The FakeSteel is the one that you're going to want to go with. It has the realistic weighting of a sword. It's all back here. It has a stronger stab tip, and it looks so beautiful. Now there is one thing that I noticed when whacking these two together. The FakeSteel has a little bit more reverberation than the Calamasil. So if I strike at the base, you can see that it vibrates. Is it the worst thing ever? No. In fact, I think that that bit of flex might help this one not only last longer, but also give a little bit more ease to the shots. For me, I don't actually mind the heft in this, and while I do enjoy like a good old-fashioned Viking sword, I'm an arming sword person all the way. So I still really would rather go with the FakeSteel. This is not a bad sword either. It's nice. It's going to be one of my loaners. And that brings me to why I'm doing all these tests and why I'm so interested in certain swords like LARP swords now. I didn't actually used to be. I was a really, really big boffer kid like a year ago. But there's a reason I'm getting intrigued by these things, and it's because I'm realizing the potential that these have with certain games. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and spoil the whole thing for you because this is a project of mine that I'm really trying to work on. Unironically, insert secret LARP jokes here again. But I think that the untapped potential these have for foam fighting communities with sometimes even hard-hitting, heavier style combat with more armor is pretty fascinating. And I think that I'm going to use these to develop something, hopefully here in New York City, that you might one day hear about. We'll see if my dreams come to fruition, but that being said, for this video, I'm going to sum it up with, I really like this sword. When testing it against something that is pretty much its equal, so, you know, from a high-end company that people really consider the golden standard of LARP weapons, I think this holds up very well. It holds its end, and I absolutely love it. And the more testing I do, the more I enjoy it. The final testing that I'm most likely going to do on this sword is going to be a long-term stamina test, or a very, very high-intensity stamina test, in which I will be basically taking one of these swords that I probably will get from FakeSteel, something that I'm not as attached to, whereas this one I find incredibly beautiful. I'm pretty attached to it. Maybe I'll get one that's kind of more like basic. Not that anything they have is boring. And really just try to go absolutely ham with it and see how long it lasts. Like, what do I have to do to destroy a FakeSteel sword? And what goes first? Is it the foam? Is it the core? Is it the handle? What will happen? I don't actually know what will happen because, as I mentioned in my other videos, my experience with these kind of swords is generally limited. So I really want to see what the boundaries are, what the limits are for these kind of swords, whether it be Calamasil, Wyvern, FakeSteel, Epic Armory. I want to see what they can hold up to. I want to see what they can handle, and I want to see what I can do with them. So with that, I bid you adieu, and I say go buy FakeSteel.